It is 5 o'clock, and we are live once again talking Oregon Ducks football on the Voice of College Football Network. My name is John Evans, and as always, joined by my co-host Owen Murray. Oh, and a big win for the Ducks this weekend. How are you feeling about where this team is at, and how we're going to get into this today about just kind of breaking down this Week 1 game, and then we're going to preview this upcoming game against Oklahoma State. So, where are you feeling about where this team is at after Week 1 now?
Man, I'm feeling great. I'm so excited that we got to see so many players this last weekend. Because I feel like it just really gives us a great it's not often that you really get to take a peek at the future in live game action for a team, and now it really feels like we know where the future of this Ducks team is. But we're gonna talk about the present. I know, but I was excited to see Jordan Davison score 3 touchdowns and a guy like Iffy step in and be so impactful. Just top to bottom of this team, it feels like there's power four starters, all over the two deep.
Yeah, I felt like this first game was just kind of a showcase for the program in terms of what Dan Lanning has built for the Ducks for this team. Like you didn't really get to learn that much because there were so many different guys getting playing time, but it was a lot of those young guys getting playing time, those guys who are getting those first time starts, and that just showcases the level of recruiting that Dan Lanning has done and the team building that he has done. Where you honestly didn't really learn that much from Week 1 because there's so many guys who did get playing time and who could really get playing time and are really very talented. That it's going to be interesting to see how this goes forward, but definitely an exciting moment for the program. Just yeah, this team is deep. They've got dudes on dudes on dudes who have been coming in these top rated recruiting classes, and it looks like this is going to continue for the future going forward.
Yeah, and these coaches have to be so excited with what they saw from all those guys because they didn't look like freshmen. These are still guys who are beating up on Montana State, all the way into the fourth quarter. And I see the question here: how are we feeling about the team going forward? And I feel like you kind of can look at it two separate ways because I feel pretty good about this team. Going over the next 4 weeks before it feels like really the first marker is that Penn State game. But I also feel pretty good now about where this program stands over the next 2-3 seasons. You understand that this team, this program really does have a history of bringing in transfers and making them successful, but they supplement that so well with recruits. And you really feel like at least half that is going to be really solid.
Yeah, college football is a game that you can't win through the transfer portal in a way you can't even in other sports like basketball with smaller rosters. You gotta win in recruiting, and that starts with getting those blue chip guys, those 5-star guys, and those high 4-star guys who are just going to build the basis of that program. And Dan Lanning has kind of, as we saw on Saturday, he's gotten those guys year after year after year, and it's guys like Tion Gray, a redshirt freshman who was a 4-star recruit, getting that first start yesterday and making an impact on the interior of the defensive line. It's exciting to see for the program overall. As we kind of look at where this team is after Week 1, the expectations were obviously high coming into the season, ranked as the number 7 team. We'll have to see where that shakes out because have some movement up and down that top 10 in college football, with Texas going down to Ohio State, Alabama dropping the surprise game to Florida State, and then LSU taking out Clemson, and then Miami taking out Notre Dame. So there will certainly be some movement around, and Oregon could find themselves as a top 5 team going into this Week 2 matchup against Oklahoma State. But as you kind of look things for yourself, I'm interested to hear where your kind of expectations were to start the season, and are those higher now, or are those lower now, or are they the same? Where are you kind of feeling after Week 1? Because of Week 1 last year, this team comes in number 3 team in the country. The expectations are almost it's a national championship caliber roster, national championship caliber team. And then Week 1, they come out and it's a dud against Idaho, 24-14. Idaho's in that game, and then the expectations drop. Everyone was like, "Oh, what is Dan Lanning doing? Is Dylan Gabriel not that guy?" They had to build that back up throughout the season and kind of to eventually become the number 1 team in the country towards the down the stretch. So, how are you feeling? Have your expectations changed at all after this Week 1 game?
I mean, I feel like personally, we kind of set our expectations pretty high. We said, I mean, when we had Jack Lazarus on the show, we all had our record predictions, and we said they were going to be 11-1, with a couple different ways to how they get to that. I feel like that's still where I'm at. I think this, as strong as this team looks, it is still a team that could drop a game, whether that is in Happy Valley or maybe a trap game to Iowa or to Washington when they're beaten up at the end of the year. But like, I mean, in that vein, I feel like this is a team that can get beaten up and still put out guys who are going to be successful against Big Ten competition. I guess my expectations are the same. I think the public expectation has definitely been raised. There was questions over whether this team was going to be whether this was a year that the Ducks would really make a run at the national championship. I think that those questions are gone.
Yeah, I agree. To me, it kind of just reaffirmed where I felt this team was at and where I thought they could be this season. And it was a team that what I had been saying was that it's a lot of question marks because these guys necessarily haven't put it on the field at Oregon or put it on the field at the college football level or put it on the field at Oregon specifically with some of those transfers like Dylan Thieneman. But the talent was there. They were ranked as top 10 preseason team for a reason. It's because of the talent and the recruiting classes that Dan Lanning has put together, and then what he's done to supplement that with talented guys like Dylan Thieneman and Bear Alexander in the transfer portal. So I think this kind of reaffirmed where I thought this team was going to be one of the best teams in the country and a potential top 5 kind of team. And after week 1, I think those questions of are those guys who are making their first collegiate starts, are they going to play to that level? And those guys that are, transferring in, are they going to hold that level and look like the guys they were at some of those smaller schools? And I think those questions have, for the most part, been answered like, yes, Oregon is that talented. Oregon is that deep. Yeah. This is a team that is going to be competing for that college football playoff spot, a Big Ten championship, and potentially a national championship in what could be one of the most wide open years that we've seen recently in college football.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that too, where you solidify the expectations is the fact that there was so little turnover within this coaching staff. Yes, Ross Douglas comes in as the wide receiver coach and does a great job. We talked about that on Saturday night. But in terms of coordinators, obviously the head coach and the guys who get them ready in spring camp, in fall camp to play this season, there was so little turnover. I think that really benefits you because last year was a national championship caliber year. Even if it didn't work out that way. And so I think, it's very difficult when you have turnover in both areas, in players and where the Ducks did have massive turnover this year. And then in the coaching staff to come back and be a national championship caliber team, the Ducks did not have coaching turnover this year. And I think that's the reason that you can say, hey, we really do understand. We know that the players are at that level that they were last year. And we already know the coaches are. They only had to prove half of it.
Yeah, I think what you said about the coaching staff really just speaks to the program that Dan Lanning has built, and the fact it's hard to retain coordinators, and the fact that Dan Lanning has done it. You've only in what has been 3 very successful seasons at Oregon. He's only lost 1 coordinator so far, and that was Kenny Dillingham after that first year, and that was a bit of a special situation where he's an Arizona State guy, and so Arizona State wants to go get their guy, and obviously it's a good look for Dan Lanning because he was very successful with Arizona State last season, so. The fact that you have Will Stein back and Tosh Lupoy and the continuity of this staff with him and Chris Hampton on the defensive side of the ball, I think that definitely just it can the impact that is it can really be felt out there, and because these guys feel disciplined on the defensive side of the ball, you feel like they're well coached and they've had that continuity of multiple years within this system with working with Tosh Lupoy and his defense, which it's a very versatile defense that can give multiple looks. So I overall I think. You've had a few coaches leave here and there, Carlos Loughlin going to Ohio State, some of those smaller position groups. But I think to have the coordinators back year after year, it really just solidifies what this program is under Dan Lanning. And the fact that his retention of the staff is so high is very important.
Yeah, and so, I mean, the next big question that's not can he win a national championship for Dan Lanning is can he continue to replace coordinators at a high level? Because I don't think Will Stein will be here for much longer. I mean, probably not next year, honestly. Tosh, Chris Hampton, could be on similar tracks. He replaced Kenny Dillingham, obviously, fantastically with Will Stein. The next question is, does he choose, and this is obviously a person-by-person question, does he choose to replace them from within the staff? Is it a guy from outside, and how successful is that? Because it's not really, it's a problem we've seen him solve once. And, as well as it's gone, you can get lucky once. The question now is whether he can do it multiple times and be successful. But that's a question for next year.
Yeah, that's how you create that sustained success. So, yeah. All right.
Now we have a John Evans special segment coming up.
All right, moving forward, we're going to talk about. I was talking to Owen a little bit before the show. what kind of way can we break down a little bit? Obviously, if you guys want to go check out our live stream from after our immediate thoughts after that game against Montana State, go check that out on our YouTube channel, on the Oregon Ducks live channel. And broke down what we saw from that game and chopped it up about that. But we're gonna do kind of a little segment here. I came up with 2 exclamation points and a question mark. So, what are 2 things that we're both excited about? And then what is something after that first game? And then what is something that we still feel like is a question mark kind of moving forward for the Ducks as we head into week 2 and into the rest of the season? So, Owen, I'll let you start it out here. What is the first thing from Saturday's game that got you really excited about where this team and this is heading this year?
Well, again, and this is something I talked about after the game. Amari Washington fired me up, man. And so what I'm going to take away from that for my first exclamation point is that defensive line development is happening year over year. We talk about getting lucky once. The it didn't. Maybe the Ducks got lucky once with Derek Harmon or with Jordan Birch or with all the other guys who have been successful as transfers or guys who have developed as recruits in the system. It's not a question anymore. This is something that Oregon is very good at. That Oregon excels at more than other programs. And Amari Washington's the newest guy. I'm sure you have his PFF grades ready for us somewhere, but he was just looked like a monster in that backfield. We talked about him on Saturday night. I'm so excited to see, not only how he does, but this really does prove that guys can come into Oregon, no matter the situation on the defensive line. And guys like Dan Lanning and Tosh and Chris Hampton and Tony Tuioti have the ability to raise their ceilings.
Yeah, Amari Washington is just a freak. Four stops for him on 4 tackles. Those are tackles that are on PFF has them in like 1 to 2 yards of the line of scrimmage, has them as shutting those plays down, and that's clearly what he was doing in that game. And just the plays that aren't going to show up on the stat box and all that stuff. The times he was in the backfield and forced someone to cut the other way and go run into Mateo Youngalola or another one of those defenders that Oregon has in their front 7. Amari Washington, we talked about it after that game. I think he's a guy who, with a season like what Derek Harmon did last year, we'll still have to see some of that pass rush production from him because not really the type of player he is necessarily. He's more of that run stuffing in the middle kind of nose tackle. But I thought it was interesting, too, to see just he was used a little bit more than in that traditional nose. That's where he was used last year for the Ducks when he was coming in as a sub for Jamari Caldwell. They kind of line him up as more of that 3-tech B-gap rusher, and I thought that was interesting to see, especially with just the amount of rotation that they had going along that defensive line. But definitely excited about where Amari Washington is going and what he's doing for the future of this team this year.
All right, bring us into your exclamation mark.
All right, my first one is Dante Moore looked comfortable, and that is just huge to see because there were question marks about where Dante Moore was going to be at. Obviously, he wasn't named the official starter until game day. We knew he was going to be the starter. He had the Beats ad, and he was selling jerseys and stuff like that. This is a guy who was a top 5 overall recruit in the country a couple seasons ago when he was initially committed to Oregon before he flipped to UCLA, and he talked about it on Saturday after the game. He was 17 when he made that first start at UCLA. He was a kid. He was not he's just not ready for the level that he was playing at that time, and he looked like a guy who had matured over the last couple of seasons. On Saturday against Montana State. He took the easy stuff. He 78% completion. You see the arm talent there. He had a couple of nice throws where even on screen passes, he's flicking them out sidearm and getting the ball out there super fast in a way that you just get your guys more time to react with the ball and try to make a play downfield. But got the ball out on time. The time to throw was low and clean. Worked the intermediate area as well. And I was excited to see what they did with him in the run game a little bit. I was reading some of the ESPN had this article that was like other coaches' thoughts on opposing quarterbacks. And one of them it was an anonymous coach said that Dante was a 4.9 speed guy and he's not really much of a dual threat, but they opened that first drive. They rate him on a QB draw for like 5 or 6 yards, and then they ran like a jet counter where the counter was coming with the right guard, right tackle pulling for him as the quarterback to run left. So I thought it was cool to see some of those design. Obviously, the creative stuff that Will Stein likes to do, getting that quarterback run game in. We saw it with Dylan Gabriel and we saw it with Bo Nix, but I thought it was good to see Dante Moore look comfortable doing that and just overall comfort behind the line of scrimmage. He wasn't under any pressure from his offensive line, kept things clean. I'll get into that here in a second, but yeah, Dante Moore looked comfortable, and that was just huge to see because we didn't know how he was going to look in a game situation because we haven't seen him do that in 2 years, and he didn't look comfortable when he was at UCLA because he was under pressure. He didn't have receivers who were open. He seems to have those things and feel comfortable with that at Oregon so far.
Yeah, I mean, he was playing the point guard role perfectly. That's what we asked him to do. And you talk about maturity, and the fact that he was 17 when he started that first game at UCLA, and that this was his first start in what, 2 years? It for the what has changed over those 2 years is so stark because I'm so impressed by what we learned, and I'll go back to something I said on Saturday again. It looks like he learned, not only from the things that were great about a guy like Dillon Gabriel, the most experienced player in college football history, but also from his mistakes, because you go back and look at one of Dan Lanning's favorite plays from that game when his second drive, they're in the low red zone, third down, Dante rolls out to his right. And it's a play where we've seen a guy like Dillon Gabriel last year, early in the season, force a throw. There's a guy who might be open in the end zone. But instead he tucks and runs, gets a couple yards, and they kick the field goal, go up 17-0. I was really impressed to see that because it shows that he's not only learning from the things that are great about a great player, but from the mistakes he made. And that just makes him such a fantastic player. And it tells me that he will learn from his own mistakes as well.
Yeah, and going to that play specifically, that was one that Dan talked about and Dante talked about in the post game, and just that Dante Moore, when he's rolling out and he's in those scramble situations, he hears Dan Lanning in the back of his head because he's had those situations enough time in practice over the last few years telling him not to throw that ball, and not make a stupid decision that would put the ball in jeopardy. So I think that just speaks to the development he has had in practice because he hasn't been on the field doing that for Oregon. But if he's, obviously he has Dan in the back of his head kind of when he's in those situations, it's because he's had those experiences in practice against one of the top defenses and has developed and matured into a more complete quarterback and one who's going to be able to lead the offense and not put the ball in jeopardy, which was a surprise from a guy like Dillon last year when in games like Michigan State and UCLA, when you're expecting a veteran who is so solid, so locked in to not do that. He wasn't quite so comfortable in the system, is what Will Stein said. Is just he didn't really feel like he knew what he needed to do on those plays because he, even when he was a veteran, he was coming in and it was his first year in the new system. Dante Moore's been in this system for a year, playing in practice every day, even when he wasn't on the field in game. So I thought it was exactly what we wanted to see from him. Oh, and moving to your next point, what was something else that you excited you to see from this first game?
Yeah, when you get to the end of a college football season, the important thing to do is not to do the really hard things very well, because you can win games without fancy plays and without freak athleticism, especially when teams are beaten down and distracted and frustrated. What's really important in those situations is that you do the easy things very well. If you're running a silent count, you understand what you're doing there. If you're going to run a lot of RPOs, you make the correct decision. I thought Oregon did the simple things in a game plan that Will Stein told us was going to be simplified very, very well in this game. You see a lot of those correct decisions. You see great communication in the offensive line, which I'm sure you'll talk about. That is what excited me because it tells me that this is a team that can succeed in those moments later in the season, or in a place where, it's way more difficult to do the hard things and you have to rely on a simple concept.
Exactly. It's a part of football at every level is you got to be able to run the football so that you can do those play actions and pass it. You got to be able to protect cleanly so that you can get to your more deep passing game and all that stuff. They did everything they were supposed to do. And when, Dan said they got more tricks up their sleeve. They got more stuff coming. They got stuff they didn't pull out against Montana State because they knew it was Montana State. They knew they didn't need to necessarily with some of the offense and some of those, those schemed blitzes that they'll bring when they really do need to against a team like Penn State. But yeah, it was simple, but it was fundamental football and doing all the right things. So when you are as talented as Oregon, you don't need to do those things to be a team like Montana State, and they did all of the little things, the making the right blocks, giving good effort on defense, all those things that you need to do to win football games. And that's all it took because they are just a more talented team than Montana State.
And you saw teams that didn't do stuff like that in week one. To go back to that Alabama game, they're not failing to win that game because they can't execute a very complicated play. They're failing because they're not giving effort, like you talked about, or they're not making the right blocks, and that's how you win big games like the one against Penn State, or if Oregon finds itself in the Big Ten championship or a playoff game. That's what's going to matter. And at least once they've proven that they can do it.
All right. So getting into my next point that I'm excited about was just how clean the offensive line looked. We saw a couple of different combinations and being able to work cleanly once you did have an injury to Emmanuel Pregnon. You were able to flip a guy in, Dave Ayuli, who started that game at right guard. He moves to left guard. But overall, everybody played really clean. There was one pressure that PFF had tracked from Dave Ayuli. But he was moving around. He was doing a lot of things during that game. For that to be one, when last season it was 13 pressures and 3 sacks for Dylan Gabriel in that first game against an FCS opponent in Idaho. That's a huge improvement. Isaiah Ward looked the part of a pass protector at left tackle. Alex Harkey was honestly who impressed me the most coming out of this game. He was vicious in the run game. Yeah, they even moved him inside to guard at one point when they were kind of moving things around, which I thought was interesting to see. And just he is a mover of dudes in on that kind of level. Want him inside and be able to work against some of those 3 techs and those defensive tackles. But yeah, clean stuff overall from the offensive line. They're getting a good push. The yards before contact was better than where this was last year on the average for the season. At getting kind of that push 1-2 yards before their running backs are even having to get touched by anybody is just a huge help. Every inch you can get, every yard you can get before your running backs have to make somebody miss or break a tackle is absolutely huge for them. So really solid, clean play from the offensive line and something they can definitely build on going forwards. I'm definitely excited to see that. And I think Dante Moore and this offenses overall are all very excited to see that because that's going to be the basis for their success this season. It's been what has been one of the bases for Oregon's success offensively the last couple of years. It's been the offensive lines, which have been nominated for Joe Moore Awards. And I think this is a group that could find itself in a similar situation by the end of the year.
Yeah, and I think, you saw some of the communication between those guys and how comfortable they were, especially when you started mixing and matching. And at Media Day, especially when we were talking to them, they talked about, how connected this room is, even though a lot of these guys have only been here for 6 months, maybe. They came in during the spring. But that those extra months, they didn't come in the fall. They came in the spring. The extra 3 months or so really, really did matter because these guys are connected off the field, on the field. And so when a guy like Pregnon goes down, not only do they feel it, but they're able to adjust. They've got a great relationship with Dante Moore, who another play we talked about was able to step up right coming out of that, out of the halftime break in that first drive on a long play, adjust his protection to address a blitz, and then play his running back Jay Harris, I think, on a Texas route.
Yeah.
To get out of that situation, that relationship is what really impressed me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's just a comfort with the offensive line that Dante Moore feels right now, and he feels like those guys aren't going to put him in situations that he doesn't want to be in. Scrambling out of the pocket. And he looked good stepping up to facing that pressure when it did come a little bit. So impressed by what I saw from Dante Moore in this offense as a whole. And what is one thing for you that you feel like you do have a question about after this week 1 game though?
Yeah, so we both talked about the trenches here a little bit, and we were very impressed by what they could do against an FCS team. But I am curious what happens when their opponents are the same size. We know that they're great communicators now. We know that they're strong from top to bottom, not only the starting 5. But I am curious what happens when they have to problem solve. When maybe they do get beat a couple times and they have to come back from it. That's something that we're not going to see for a little bit. Maybe it does happen against a Power 4 team in Oklahoma State, and we'll ask Cody Stovall about that in a little bit. But that's the question that remains for me, because it looked great, and that also kind of feeds into what does Dante Moore look like under pressure, because he wasn't under pressure in this game at all.
Yeah, I think this team has the trenches and has the guys that can do that and will kind of step up to that level when they do face those opponents. But yeah, I think it is a question mark because you just didn't see it this weekend. Montana State had one guy over 300 pounds on their entire defensive line. That's not going to be the way it is for the majority of teams you face, Oklahoma State or throughout the Big Ten throughout this year. So I think we'll have to see how it looks going forward, but definitely something I think the Ducks can do. I think they have a very veteran offensive line group that will be solid, and the defensive line I think is ridiculously talented and very, very deep. when you look at a defensive line last year that had 3 guys go in the first 2 days of the NFL draft, I think this is I don't know where Mateo Ngalale, I don't know where Amari Washington is going to get picked, but you're going to put out similar type numbers in the NFL draft next year, just with the talent that you have on this defensive line. And that's not even going to include guys like Tion Graves, who's a redshirt freshman, or Naden Breland, who got a couple of snaps in there. It's just a very talented group in the trenches, and I think you're going to continue to see that throughout the season.
Absolutely. It's not a doubt so much as it just like I'm interested to see.
Yeah, for me, Mekhi Hughes is a question right now. What is going on with him? We're gonna have to. I'm headed to Dan Lanning's presser after our show tonight, so we're gonna have to. We'll have to see who can get a question in there about Mekhi Hughes, and if Dan Lanning will answer it at all, because I would suspect that's gonna be a no. But big time transfer, running back, 1,400 yards, 15 touchdowns for Tulane last year. This is a guy that his NIL valuations were close to $1 million. People thought this was going to be a big part of the Oregon team this year, and we didn't see him until the end of the first half. Whittington got the start in that game, but then it was Jalen Lamar off the bench. It was bringing Jordan Davison off the bench, bringing Jay Harris off the bench, and Mekhi Hughes just sitting and waiting. So we're gonna have to see where, what his role really is with this team this year. I thought he was a guy who could be a bell cow kind of back for this team, and they could really rely on him to be that number one guy, and then use Whittington kind of off of that, as a more of a dynamic, speedy kind of guy in the pass game and stuff like that. But Whittington looked like to be RB1 for this team on Saturday. 10 carries for him, 68 yards, really, really good game, broke some explosives. But yeah, we have to see where Mekhi Hughes, where he kind of falls into this running back room, and where this rotation falls across the board, because we did see all 7 running backs get touches on Saturday, and all 7 of them flashed and looked good at certain times. The freshman looked good, Dewan Riggs looked good, and then obviously what is this kind of combination at the top going to be between guys like Noah Whittington and Jaden Lamar, and then Mekhi Hughes ultimately. So I'm interested to see what you think about this, and I think this is kind of everybody's big question after week 1, because he was a guy who had a lot of expectations, and he just kind of didn't show up at all, but it wasn't asked to show up really. So
yeah, and then when you talk about the fact he could have been a bell cow guy, I think the interesting thing is there's so many guys in this room who are so good at specific things. You talk about the speed of Noah Whittington, but then you talk about the physicality of a guy like Jordan Davison, or how good some of these freshmen are, Thunder and Lightning. Mekhi Hughes feels like a guy, at least we think, who can do a lot of that, and who could kind of be, Duck fans hope, the best of all of that. So I'm curious where he fits in when you have guys who are, I don't want to say specialists, but just like very talented at specific parts, and give a very specific benefit to this offense. I'm curious to see where he fits in, where he's pretty good at all of it.
Yeah, he's a guy who you thought he could just kind of be the number one back, be that lead back who's in there on early downs, can be in there on third down and catch some passes out of the backfield. But yeah, we'll see how that shakes out, because you do have guys like Jordan, like you said, the Thunder and Lightning duo of Davison and De'Aaron Hill. I thought that was really exciting to see in that first week. And Davison, I asked Dan about it specifically, is how is he going to factor in there as kind of just a red zone guy, because he is 236 pounds, and I mean, I was sitting up there in warmups, spotted him with the binoculars, and I was like, wow, he's just big for a running back. He doesn't look like the rest of the running backs out there. So I think he's throughout practice, throughout the preseason, they like the way he kind of bounces off people and can fall forward. So I think he'll be a guy that could definitely work into that, a bit of that rotation in the red zone. So excited to see where he goes moving forward, and the rest of these running backs. You just got a lot of really very talented guys. So excited to see where this goes within these running backs, and curious to see about what Mekhi Hughes' kind of role ends up being.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're gonna head to a break here. When we come back, we're bringing Locked On Oklahoma State's Cody Stovall on. Gonna preview this next game coming up on Saturday. Kicks off at 12:30. We'll see you right after the break.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the voice of college football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the voice of college football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select a betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.
All right, welcome back and welcome to the show, Cody Stovall. Cody, thanks so much for coming on. We're going to preview this Oklahoma State game because the Ducks, they're 28.5 point favorites. That's where the Montana State line closed at. But it feels like a departure from the esteem that Oklahoma State has been held in. A guy like the coach that you guys have,
Gundy.
Gundy, sorry.
Hey, don't do that. He's a man, okay? He's almost 60 now. Come on.
I put it on the note sheet for you, Owen.
I know.
All that stuff.
My screen got messed up. Where is this program at? Because you're coming off a win, but it feels like maybe not necessarily where Cowboys were a couple years ago.
Yeah, no, I mean, the state of the program is a little bit in flux. I guess you could say that. Naturally, the game against UT Martin started off so well. Haas Haney was like giving us, visions of Spencer Sanders early on, and there was a lot of talk like, holy crap, we might be back. We might be good again. We might give Oregon a real run for their money, which I was hoping for, because I've been writing a few checks that my butt cannot cash at the moment. The most recent Oregon show I was on, I said it'll be close. It'll be like 34-31. Okay, maybe not so much, but it will not be a 28-point loss. I feel pretty confident at least going there.
Yeah, because this Oklahoma State program under Coach Mike Gundy has been just a consistent one over the years. The last year was the first year that you guys didn't make a bowl game since his first year. Is the feeling that because he is such a solidified coach that he is going to correct things and send things in the right direction overall?
I mean, when somebody has 20 years worth of successful track record, I do think that you have to give him at least a little bit of leeway. Now, it is a completely new age of college football, the NIL realignment era. There's been several coaches like Mike Gundy, Dabo Swinney, that were very reluctant to get involved, right? And Gundy even mentioned recently, we didn't get into the NIL stuff until this season. Last year, we spent like $5 million, but it was just on a handful of guys. This is the first year that Oklahoma State's creeping into that, probably 13, 15-ish mil when it comes to NIL. It pales in comparison to a lot of the upper echelon teams in the country, but it's a good start, right? And I think that's Mike Gundy embracing the fact that he understands that he had to make some changes. And we went very, very heavy in the portal. And that either goes one of two ways, right? Whenever you get 50-plus new dudes in the portal, it either works really, really well, right? Like Mel Tuckle a couple years ago at Michigan State, a couple years ago Florida State, but it also can go disastrously like Florida State this previous year. So we don't know necessarily what we have, but at least it's a little bit exciting. We have a better brand of football than last year. That's pretty visible at least.
Yeah, Cody, I'm sure Oregon fans spent this whole offseason talking about what a new quarterback's going to look like. Dante Moore came in and impressed people in week 1 against Montana State. Oklahoma State's replacing its quarterback too, but not necessarily planned. What is the drop off between Haney and Flores, and what should fans expect?
Well, I mean, we haven't seen a lot of Zane Flores, right? What we saw at UT Martin is the extent of what he's gotten in his college career. Now, coming into Oklahoma State, he was viewed very highly. He was Nebraska, Mr. Nebraska Player of the Year, Gatorade Player of the Year. I think he still holds the Nebraska's records for all passing yards. So he came in very highly touted, made it to the final 15 of the Elite 11. So we've been waiting on the Zane train to take off. But then Haas Haney showed up, right? And as I've discussed on some other podcasts, Oklahoma State with Haas Haney had enough speed to at least be competitive in that department against Oregon. Without Haas Haney, it does change the complexion of this offense quite a bit. Zane Flores is going to be more of a pocket passer. He does have a mobile presence, but he's not Haas. Haas Haney is not a run-first guy, but you know the drill, right? Whenever you have a quarterback like a Bo Nix, like a Dylan Gabriel, if they have the ability to get out and run a 4.4 40, you kind of want them to run occasionally. The downside is injuries, and that's precisely what happened to Haas. As soon as we got a taste of what things could be, he broke his foot. So now we go to more of the traditional pocket passer presence in Zane Flores. And I think we are going to have to get a little bit more creative. With Haas Haney, the defensive line couldn't exactly pin their ears back 24/7 because he is so fast, he's so elusive that you have to find a way to contain him, right? Zane Flores is a little bit of a different animal. And as UT Martin showed against Zane Flores, who doesn't have the running escapability, they can pin their ears back. And so I won't lie, Oregon's D-line is a little scary right now. I'm not getting a ton of sleep at the moment.
That's what we just finished talking about, too.
Yeah, when Haney does go and lead to touchdown drives on those first two possessions, how much can you really feel like you can take away from what Flores did in that first game? Because it wasn't the starter going into that. He wasn't being prepped to be the starter. Do you feel like there will be some changes in the game plan and throughout practice this week as they lead up to this Oregon game, knowing that Flores is going to be the starter?
Significantly, right? Because obviously Haas Haney is going to be reading the defensive end and the linebackers on an RPO style of situation a little bit more so than a Zane Flores. In order for the zone blocking scheme to work, though, you have to be able to create cutback lanes. We did that against UT Martin, but our running backs weren't hitting the holes, right? And that's the biggest thing. Of course, there's going to be a drop-off to some degree from Haas Haney to Zane Flores. You mentioned we didn't get to see a lot of what Zane could do. He did drop a couple of beautiful passes, and then there towards the latter half of the game, he started getting in rhythm, right? He started looking comfortable. He started driving us down the field in the fourth quarter. The second and third quarter, though, they were just kind of ugly. So we don't know precisely what we have, but I do know that in order for Zane to have any success in Eugene, Oregon, our running backs are going to have to do more. Live, it really felt like the offensive line was the biggest culprit to the deficiencies we had. But I went back and watched most of the game, and that's not really the case. Our offensive line did create holes. They did create mismatch opportunities. Our running backs were just not seeing the cutbacks. And that has to change in Eugene, or it's going to be a long day.
Well, what is the running back room like there? Is it guys who should be hitting the holes, or is that something you guys maybe expected coming into this week?
Well, so it's funny you ask. Coming into fall, RB1 was a true freshman who played a little bit last year, Rodney Fields. He's been banged up, right? He was banged up a little bit in the spring, a little bit in the fall. So it's still up in the air if he's going to make the trip to Eugene, Oregon to play. If Rodney Fields is healthy and he does play, it does add a different dynamic. The number 2 for most of the fall was Trent Hallen, the big 6'3", 255-pound running back transfer from Indiana that led to Indiana in rushing a couple of years ago. Well, he didn't get to play against UT Martin either. So if we have either one of those dudes back, you do feel much more comfortable going into Oregon. But I will say the running back that has been causing all of the noise in the fall and in the spring was OU transfer Caleb Hicks. So since we didn't have Rodney and we didn't have Trent, Caleb Hicks got the start against UT Martin. And for all of the talk about how phenomenal he was in the fall, that did not show up on the field against UT Martin.
Yeah, I was interested to see when I was looking through some of the stats from that game that PFF tracked all of his yards as coming after contact in that game. Do you feel like he was the offensive? You said he was getting kind of those holes from the offensive line and wasn't taking advantage. Do you think that was on him, just kind of running into dudes and not being as familiar and comfortable within the offense and being able to make those reads?
100%, right? It's very visible that he has a propensity to try to bounce it outside. Right. And when you have top-notch speed, right, that is something that you try to do. But at this level, right, you have to be able to run between the tackles. And it's almost a shame because the one or two times he did run through the tackles, he absolutely dominated a linebacker and sent the linebacker flying 2 yards backwards. So he can do it. But against UT Martin, he seemingly kept trying to pop everything outside. And you pause the film and you see a hole, right? You see a hole in the B gap, and he's already past the hole. So, they always talk about you want to hit the hole hard, but you also have to have that beautiful amount of patience. That's something Caleb Hicks is going to have to establish in order for the Cowboys to have some success against the Ducks, because there's going to be lanes, but if you're already running too far away to get to them and you're trying to extend east to west against Oregon, it's never going to work. Right? We might have enough speed to make things interesting, but if we try to go east to west and outrun Oregon, we're going to get decimated, fellas.
I'm sure because do you see the Taco Dowler quote? He just said these guys are like freak athletes. The difference from the SCS to the FBS level.
Yeah.
And for what it's worth, Taco Dowler played unbelievably in that
Yes,
game. He's a guy who feels like he's going to get a shot. What are the keys for Oklahoma State to get a chance in this game? Because it feels like we were just talking about the fact that the Ducks look so strong top to bottom.
Yeah.
And it feels like there's not really a drop off from 1 to 2 to 3 on the depth chart. How does Oklahoma State overcome that? Like it can it? It feels like it can.
Well, Mike Gundy did mention it in his press conference this morning, right? When he was asked about the offensive line, he kind of reiterated, he didn't go into depth, but he did say that they actually didn't play all that bad. They just need to play more physical, right? So in order for them to have any success in Eugene, they're going to have to be significantly more physical. That's first of all. Second of all, it doesn't matter if the running backs aren't seeing the lane. So we got to get some participation out of the running back room. And I'll tell you, the most important factor to the Cowboys staying into this game is going to be our defense. And primarily the South Carolina Wendell Gregory, who began his Oklahoma State career by tying an all-time Big 12 record with 3 sacks in his first game ever. If he can bring that energy to Eugene, Oregon, that is somebody that you guys are going to have to pay attention to. So whether it's the running back chipping out of the backfield or adding a tight end, you have the same dude in Ugalele. I'm probably murdering his name, and I should be punched in the throat for it. But you have that level of dude too. So we're going to have to do the same thing. We're going to have to put in a little bit of extra protection. The difference is on the other side of the D-line, you still have problems. We don't know what we have in the other side of the defensive line. We know what we have out of Wendell Gregory, but the other side, it's been Deshaun Brown and Julio Johnson. Well, Deshaun Brown's out. They haven't given a timeline for how long he's out, but that's one of our starting defensive ends that will not be playing against Oregon. So now it's going to come up to Jaleel Johnson. Is he going to be able to come together? We didn't see Kyron Duhon. Kyron Duhon was a freshman All-American, had 7 sacks last year at UTEP, had several SEC and Big Ten offers, turned them down to come to Stillwater. He didn't play against UT Martin, and he's supposed to be a massive cog in this machine. So I think defensively, this is where we're going to have to carry over. Middle linebacker, Akron transfer, had a 5th-round draft grade, comes to Oklahoma State, started his career. He had 14 tackles and 2 tackles for loss the other day. Another transfer, outside linebacker, Brandon Walls, chipped in another 11 tackles. We had really good play out of our corners. That was the most surprising thing. No Jalen Davies, and we don't know if he's hurt or he couldn't. We don't know why he wasn't out there. But without Jalen Davies, I was a little concerned. I will admit that our cornerbacks actually looked really good against UT Martin. So defensively, we have some hope.
Yeah, because defensive was one of the main things I wanted to ask you about, because that was something that this team really struggled with last year was the defense. It was towards the bottom and against both the pass and the run. So do you feel like the impact from some of those new guys can be felt already? And how do you feel like because as I was looking at it, I feel like secondary is one of the places that it seemed like there was some of the most there was the least turnover. You had guys who were coming back in terms of like Dylan Smith at safety and Cam Smith, a guy who was starting at corner for the team last year. So do you feel like some of that continuity year over year just can help a little bit?
Well, continuity is typically the name of the game in Stillwater, Oklahoma, right? Which is why we traditionally held on to coaches for 14, 17, 19 years. This is all new, but it had to happen. Mike Gundy had to fire everybody, and he had to completely rebuild. And why we have faith is because he rebuilt with an entire SEC staff. Todd Grantham started in his SEC days in 2015 with Mississippi State. But if you look at the 7 coaches that he brought with him, they all tie back to those original days at Mississippi State in 2015. They coached together at Georgia. They coached together at Bama. They coached together at Florida. A couple of them went off into the NFL. Now they're all back together again in Stillwater. And that's what we did, right? Well, we mentioned the NIL money being significantly bigger finally in Stillwater. Fellas, most of that was all D-line and linebackers. Most of the NIL went to the D-line and linebackers, and that is where we need to see the biggest differentiation between this year's squad and last year's squad is against Oregon. Because against UT Martin, we were in the backfield all day, right? That wasn't an issue getting back there. But we missed out on a few sacks, right? We missed out on a couple more tackles for loss. We missed out on a couple more batted balls. So getting in the backfield and having the results of living in the backfield are two different things that we have to see against Oregon. And you mentioned the secondary, yes. We do have Landon Cleveland coming back, 4-star coming out of high school this previous season, was one of our highest rated dudes. Played a little bit as a freshman, but now this is his redshirt freshman season, right? So this is his opportunity. We bring Cam Smith back. We bring Cale Smith back. Kenneth Harris Jr., he's 2 years in the system now. He played like a man possessed the other day. So, yeah, again, defensively, there's a lot of optimism. There's a lot of reasons for hope. There's a lot to look at and say, you know what? Should we beat Oregon? No. Are we good enough to at least keep it close? If the defense plays well, absolutely. And consolation prizes are for the birds, okay? Yes, we can all agree with that. But if Oklahoma State goes and they're competitive against Oregon and, you know, we can come back to Stillwater with our heads held high, that's okay. I hate consolation prizes, but at the same point in time, fellas, I don't know about you guys, but Oregon looked like one of the best teams in America over the weekend. Right? They look significantly better than Bama. They look way better than South Carolina. They look way better than Notre Dame. They look better than Miami. Like, I don't know very many teams that played this weekend that you could have said, oh, yeah, they're better than Oregon. Even Ohio State, they played good, but better than Oregon good? I don't think so.
Yeah, see, this is where we're at because, you know, we're trying to figure out, hey, like, where is Oregon? Because the question before the season was, is this a national championship year for the Ducks? And it feels like after – this weekend, we say that, yes, this is absolutely a year they can contend. But the big question that I had coming out of this weekend is can this offensive line hold up against FBS talent? Because we saw them be really strong. Dante Moore I think it was one hurry, never touched in the game against Montana State. But is that going to happen against Oklahoma State? Does that feel like really that is the opportunity? Because we haven't seen Dante Moore under pressure. When he was under pressure a couple of years ago in his freshman year at UCLA, he didn't look great. Is that really kind of the inflection point here?
Oh, 100%. And then that's what Todd Grantham's always been known for. He's a pressure guy. He likes to send blitzes almost every down from crazy angles. We didn't see any of that against UT Martin, right? But if you go back and look at Todd Grantham's track record, that's who he is. Even back at Florida when he had the number 2 ranked SEC defense, number 7 ranked rush defense in the country. He's an aggressive dude. That's how Todd Grantham likes to make his living. Now, that does open up opportunities to get burnt in the back end sometimes, and that's what Florida fans will tell you about Todd Grantham. He's great on first and second down. He's great at sacks and tackles for loss, but third and Grantham was a saying that was trending in Florida country. My guess is after Florida did his stop with Saban kind of correct him, right? Because everybody gives Saban a lot of credit that if you need to kind of refix your career, you go to the Saban school. And that's what Todd Grantham did. He left Florida, went and coached the D-line at Alabama under Nick Saban. Hopefully he learned how to navigate third downs a little bit better in that one.
So do you feel like those explosives are kind of an area that the Oregon can take advantage of in some of those third down situations if they find the matchup they like, and with guys like DeCorian Moore, who in an instant he can be gone for a 40-yard touchdown? Do you feel like they can take advantage a little bit there? And if Oklahoma State is being physical in the front seven on the line of scrimmage in a way that Oregon didn't have to face against Montana State, do you think they can utilize Dante Moore's arm talent to kind of hit those shots over the top?
Unfortunately, yes. But it's a calculated risk, right? So if we try to show up to Eugene and go 11 on 11, man on man, all daggone day, it's going to get ugly. So Todd Grantham's going to have to take some risk. Well, where do you take the risk at? If you spend all of your money in the defensive line and the linebackers, that's where you got to take your risk at, right? So I think we have to be overly aggressive, which is going to put us in a precarious situation at times in the back end. But the chess match is, can being overly aggressive knock Dante Moore off his platform enough to give the DBs time to recover? If that's the case, then all you are is a few turnovers away from this thing getting kind of ugly. I mean, look at Georgia Tech, Colorado.
Yep.
Like, Colorado beat them more often than not all day. But when you start the game with 3 turnovers and then your quarterback starts missing passes that are wide open in the end zone, it has a snowball effect to it. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to catch lightning in a bottle in Eugene and just make it an ugly, dirty, muddy, nasty fist fight. Because 2 weeks ago, I was yelling, hooting, and hollering for a track meet. I wanted all of that smoke. I wanted all of that Oregon. Now I don't, okay? I'm retracting a little bit of this mouthpiece here. I don't want a track meet with Oregon anymore. Now I want a dogfight, all right?
When you look back at that other side of the ball on offense, what do you feel like the game plan is going to be for Oklahoma State with Flores at quarterback? Obviously having to change things up without Haney's speed out there and being able to kind of use that threat in the quarterback run game. How do you think this game plan is going to attack? Is it going to be trying to rely on that run game and get that outside zone game kind of going, or is it going to be a little bit more drop back kind of stuff?
I think it's going to be old school. I think it's going to be Brandon Weeden, Justin Blackman style of offense in 2011, when Weeden would get the ball out of his hand in like 2.7 seconds. That was it, right? Brandon Weeden wasn't trying to do anything fancy. He wasn't trying to read a defense and pick it apart. Brandon Weeden was about getting the ball out as fast as he could and throwing it to certain spots, right? Giving the wide receivers and running backs room in the open field to make some crazy things happen. I feel like that's probably the route we should go, because if we try to just hand the ball off, run a traditional offense, whether it's zone blocking scheme or not, I think you're playing into Oregon's hands. And as fast as you guys can operate, if we get down 21-0, that's all she wrote, fellas. We have to keep this thing ugly, dirty, nasty, close. It's got to be a little bit of a fist fight. If you can take a fist fight into the fourth quarter, then you have a chance. But if there's ever a point in this game where we have to play catch up, I think that's where it could put us in a precarious situation moving forward. And as dominant as your front seven looked, I think we would be wise to utilize the guys on the outside and just try to get you guys running east to west over and over and over and over again, because you have crazy depth, right? We need to see that. We need to run tempo so much, so far, so fast that it forces you guys to rotate. And maybe in those rotations is where we can catch a dude napping here and there.
How do you feel like a guy like Terrell Davis kind of fits into those plans as a guy who can make those explosives? Saw a couple of them last week. And then what was the expectation with him just in the program? Because obviously the huge season last year at Central Oklahoma, was he a guy that people feel like can really change games with some of his explosivity in the pass game?
Yes, especially because of his emergence this quickly, right? We just got him in the fall from UCO, and you just mentioned he had like 1,609 yards receiving at UCO. Was All-American, led the country in a lot of different categories, not just at Division II level, but also Division I. But, that's a big step up, right? Going from D2 to Power 4 football, it's a big transition. So everyone was excited about his versatility, his athleticism, his 40-inch vertical, and his speed. But, was he going to be able to understand the offense? Was he going to be able to understand the necessary spacing? Was he going to be able to understand the different nuances of why this route has to be this exact way? We thought that would take some time. It didn't, fellas. That's the crazy part. The fact that he was able to come in a matter of a couple months, not only pick up the system, pick up all the route concepts, get on the same page with the quarterbacks, and make a big name for himself. That's why we're excited, because we did bring in Shamar Rigby from Purdue that started all season as a true freshman, right? And we also have 6'5", 225-pound Io Shotomai King coming over. And Jalen Lloyd, the speedster, national champion in track and field from Nebraska, had a 600-yard receiving season at Nebraska and a 400-yard receiving season at Nebraska. And he beat out all of them dudes. So some of the heavy hitters from the biggest programs around the country that we paid big boy money, he came in from D2 and beat all those dudes out in just like 2 months. That's why we're excited. You hear the concept of raw. He's raw. He is. But he has the things that you can't coach.
Cody, before we get into some score predictions here, just to close it out, we've talked a little bit about where Oklahoma is, where Oregon is. If Oregon gets this win on Saturday, is this a legit feather in the cap win? Can the Ducks hang their hat and say we beat a very good team here, or does it feel like a win is just hey, we yes, we should have won, but we really should have won, and this doesn't really say anything about the skill level of our program. Where does this kind of fit into that scale of quality wins?
I think it is a feather in the cap, right? It's going to be towards the latter half of the season before we can dictate how big of the feather that is. But like I just mentioned, when you go get Wendell Gregory from South Carolina, Jalen Davies, Savili Kavusi from UCLA, J.K. Johnson from LSU, Morkai McDaniel from Florida, Demarion Thomas from Vanderbilt. Whenever you go get all these dudes that started at Big Ten and SEC schools, I mean, you have to have faith that talent level is going to shine out on the field. Now, it might not happen, right? But at the end of the day, Oregon can sit back and say this wasn't Montana State. This is a team that did heavily invest in SEC talent to rebuild their roster. So if we can beat them athletically, physically, we're beating a team that is at least in the conversation of on our level.
All right. Well, so like I said, there we're gonna get into some score predictions here. As Cody wraps up his time with us, Cody, we'll start with you. What is a realistic prediction? I know you said it's not going to be that huge spread. How close is it going to be?
So I originally was puffing my chest out, real proud, and I said 34-31, the last Oregon show. I'm not going to make that mistake here. All right, fellas. But I do think it's nowhere near that 28-point margin. I think that offensively we may have some struggles. Defensively, I think we're able to create enough turmoil to keep it close. With that being said, I feel like it's probably – I'll stick with that 34 number, but I think it's going to be more like 34-10 range, 34-14. I'll go 34-14.
Yeah, for me, I have it 38-13 right now. I think Oregon's offense just has a level of explosiveness that Oklahoma State didn't see last week, and has some things that they can. Dan Lang talked about. They have more things in the back. They did not pull out everything against a team in Montana State that they really didn't feel like they have to. But I think I'm excited to see what the defense does for Oregon this weekend. In terms of you are playing a team that has legitimate guys up front and who have starting experience at the Power 5 level.
Right.
And how does that look in the trenches when you're just matching up against the level of athletes that you're going to play throughout the rest of the season? But I think that Oregon's talent across the board is going to be a little bit too much. And I think that because if there wasn't a quarterback change, if you weren't trying to deal with that at the same time, I think Oklahoma State could be a lot more of a threat. But I think that really limits what Oklahoma State can do offensively, especially if you're not able to get the ball in Davis's hands and be able to make those big plays downfield and take advantage of some of the younger guys that Oregon does have in their secondary. So I would go with 38-13. I think Oregon's, I don't think it can cover that 28.5 point spread, but I think it will be around a 20-ish point game because Oregon is just a different level in terms of the athletes that they have.
Let me add another touchdown. You gave me a good idea. I think we are gonna get cute, right? I think we're gonna have to pull off double reverse, Hail Mary style of thing. So that we'll get a cutesy touchdown. So I'll say 34-21. All right. Now I can sleep. Now I can sleep better at night.
I was gonna give you guys 35-17. I'm in the same boat with you where I do think the jump kind of to a Power 4 level will not surprise the Ducks necessarily, but it does make an impact. I think Oklahoma State really can score against this Ducks defense because we saw, that it's not perfect. A guy like Taco Dowler is able to make a couple guys miss and have there was like a 30-yard gain in that game. I feel like I'll give you enough credit for 17 points, but I'm really excited to see what Dante Moore can do when he has to problem solve. We were talking about this earlier. Because he really, there were only a couple moments there in the Montana State game where he had to say, hey, something's not right. Let me make an adjustment at the line. Let me do something on the fly here. I think that's going to happen way more often in this game. And I believe in him to be able to make those decisions accurately because we were talking about how much he's matured since those UCLA, the starts, the year there down in LA. I think this is a really big proving ground for a guy like him because it's not Montana State. Like you said, this is a legit program.
Yeah, I think we're going to dial it up and make it difficult on him. So I'll be honest with you, I'm intrigued to see how this goes as well because I've been kind of down on Dante Moore. I'm not going to sit here and pretend otherwise.
Oh, of course. That's legit.
Yeah, I it's hard to judge what a true freshman does, but he was a true freshman at UCLA. What he had 11 touchdowns, 9 picks, 1,600 yards. So not great, right? Not bad, just kind of and then I watched the Oregon spring game. He threw a couple NFL dimes, but he also threw a couple dead ducks too, right? So when I watched your spring game, I said, they're not going to beat the tar out of us because you guys got blessed with Dylan Gabriel and Bo Nix. You guys have been spoiled is what it is. You guys have been so spoiled with phenomenal quarterback play that now you go back to a quarterback that's probably pretty daggone good, but is he NFL getting legit snaps good? That I don't necessarily think so, but Oregon has enough talent around him that it may not matter all that much. I just know that I would imagine that Oklahoma State has an emphasis on being much more aggressive, much more physical, and making Dante Moore beat us. Like, is he going to drop some dimes for 60 yards? Very, very possible. But we're going to make him do that. And we're going to make him do that with some 6'5", 275 pound dudes in his face.
Awesome. Cody, I want to give you a chance here. you've been so fantastic with us. To plug Locked On a little bit, where can people watch your stuff?
Yeah, so Locked On Oklahoma State. I try to keep it simplistic. You know what I mean? I try not to make life overly complicated. You can also find me on the Twitterverse, X, at Aldeo State, and then all the other social media thingamahobbies. What is it? O State All Day. That's how much I'm on them. That's how technically advanced I am, guys.
Awesome. Well, yeah, Cody, thank you so much again. It's been great experience talking to you. I mean, best of luck to the Cowboys, because I'm really excited. This is the best time in college football because you get to really learn about these programs that we haven't seen for so long. Our show will be live after the game around 6 once we wrap up media responsibilities. And we'll be back every Monday now at 5 p.m. Go watch Cody's show. We'd love to have you back here. It's going to be a big year for Ducks and the Cowboys. We're really excited to see. Cody, thanks so much. John, it's been great. I'm Owen Murray. We'll see you on Saturday.